Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, as you can tell from the title, I'm going to be talking about growing up homeless and poor. Now, I'm not making this video because I want anyone to feel bad for me. In fact, no one really knows these stories except for my husband and my family, obviously. Embarrassed of it my entire life, being a low-income family, and bouncing around from house to house was really embarrassing, and no one knew except people that were very close to me. And by close to me, I mean there was like one or two friends that really knew the severity of my life. And my husband obviously knows about my childhood and growing up poor and from bouncing from house to house. But I figured this is probably a good time to talk about. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there right now that can relate to these stories, being a low-income family and really relying on school lunches to eat. If not for school lunches, there's so many times that I would have gone hungry, like during the summer. I'm not in any way blaming my mother. She could have been better. Yes, absolutely. But she deals with a lot of mental health issues. And she was a single young mother to two children who were only 2 years apart. So I'm sure that's very hard. So yeah, I'm not blaming my mom, but I just want to put these stories out there and maybe someone else can relate. Started when we moved to New Hampshire from Florida. That's where my sister and I were born. Our dads were not in our lives. In fact, I didn't even meet my dad until I was 21. We grew up without fathers, and we just had our mom, and we had our grandmother, and she was more of a mother to me than my mom was. She was much more nurturing and loving, and they were just very different people. Even though it's their mother and daughter, they just were very different. And I think a lot of my mom's traits come from her dad, who was also not a very nice man, but that is besides the point. My mom was a single mom, like I said, so right off the bat, we were low income. She, worked different jobs. She had really no stability. And there's one house that I really remember feeling safe in. And then once we moved out of that house, I never really felt safe or like I was home. And I really loved that house. That's where a lot of my childhood was in that house, even though we didn't live there very long. I remember riding my bike around the neighborhood and having friends. And I do want to point out that we did live in low-income housing. Like, it was state housing, and a lot of other low-income families lived there as well. And it was great. We had so much fun. We would go it was in the middle of the woods, sort of, so we would go behind the houses and pick raspberries and blackberries and go down to the creek and look at frogs and stuff like that. And that was a joyful time in my life. Then my mom sort of got lost, and I think that's where it all started. The first time we were homeless was when we lived in a tiny town, and our house the chimney caught on fire and caused my mom, me, and my grandmother to have carbon monoxide poisoning. And we didn't have a lawyer or anything. We couldn't afford it. We lived with my grandmother because we couldn't afford to live on our own and have like a big enough house. And we lived in low-income housing my whole life up until that point. So we lived with my grandma in this really old house. And like I said, the chimney caught on fire. So ambulance came, firefighters came. I spent the whole day in the hospital hooked up to an IV. I think the scale is like 12 is the max, and I had a level of 10. So and I was sleeping. So I literally woke up in a fireman's arms. So had they not come get me, I probably would not be here today, because carbon monoxide is a silent killer. After that happened, we got evicted from our house. So we literally had 24 hours to leave our house. We put all of our stuff outside so we could come back and get it with the sheriff. And we grabbed all that we could, which means we left like so much stuff, baby pictures, all kinds of things. I think I have like maybe a few baby pictures left that my grandmother in Florida sent my sister. And yeah, that's really it. We ended up having to move in with my sister's friend, which is very awkward, and it's like, it makes me feel so embarrassed, but there's nothing to be embarrassed about because I feel so grateful that they took us in, and we lived there for probably a couple weeks until we moved to Florida. When we moved to Florida, we lived with my grandparents, my mom's dad and his wife, and it was horrible. It was probably the worst experience that I've gone through in my life. We lived on a couch. All three of us slept on a couch. And there was so many fleas, and like the house would flood. Sorry. It was so horrible. And like I had to leave all my friends. I think I was like 13. I had to leave all my friends, and I just started making friends because we had just moved to that town. So, and my mom always told me, it's temporary. And I remember enrolling in school, and we lived in a bad part of Florida. We lived in Miami, which is where we were born. And I remember we toured the school, and there was literally like fences that were so high. It felt like a prison. It's already scary enough when you go into a new school not knowing anyone. But it's even harder when you come from a completely different state. And I just remember like feeling so much anxiety every day. Like my mom would have to force me to go to school every day, and I would cry every day on my way to school because it was just so horrible. And she was supposed to come have lunch with me, and they said, your mom can't come have lunch with you, the kids will make fun of you. No other way to describe that feeling, and it gives me so much anxiety still thinking about it. And then she pulled me out. My sister couldn't even go to school because the schools were so overpacked with children, and it was a dangerous school. They had like drive-by shootings every Thursday, and like it was just really a terrible situation. My uncle had a girlfriend who they also lived there. I remember I was so young. I said something stupid like, you're not part of this family, to her, because she wasn't a wife, and she wasn't my aunt. So when you're young, you say things you don't really mean. You don't know the severity of it. And I remember he came home, flying home, flung open the door, grabbed me by my arm, and was screaming at me. And just like, I called Nan, and Nan ended up calling back to my grandfather and screaming at him, and they got into a fight, and so they kicked us out. We were in a whole different state that we didn't know anyone. And so we had to live with this girl my mom had just met. Her name was Becky, and she was crazy. We also slept, all three of us slept on a tiny couch, like so small. And we would take turns sleeping because there wasn't enough room. And her and her husband would fight every single night. And then they eventually kicked us out too. So we had to go live with another lady that I don't even know. I never met her before. And we had to stay in her young daughter. She had a daughter that was my sister's age, and we stayed in her room. And I just remember playing her PSP all day because she's trying to escape. I So my mom took me out of school. She said, we're going back to New Hampshire. And I was so excited. And then that month would come around and she said, I don't have the money. I can't go back. And so she put me back, and the art teacher was like, I thought you were moving back. And what am I gonna say? My mom can't afford to move us back. I sat alone every day. I had no money for lunch. And I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I'm not trying to have like a pity party. But I want people to know me and where I come from and the struggles I've been through in life, and maybe someone else can relate. But so eventually my mom got a new car and we drove all the way back to New Hampshire, where we lived with my grandmother in a studio apartment. So it was me, my mom, my sister, my grandmother, and our 2 dogs, and then my nan's dog. And we lived there it was literally the size of this room, the apartment. It was so tiny. It had a bathroom. And I feel so, so grateful that my grandmother opened her home to us. And she always did that. We lived there for a really long time, and I was finally able to go back to the school that I went to, but everything was so different. Everyone was so different. I can't even remember a timeline of how long I was gone, but when I came back, I left in the summer. When I came back, it was snowing, and there was a lot of snow. A couple months for Mom to be able to afford to get an apartment, and luckily we were able to move just below my grandmother's studio, and it was a 2-bedroom because that's all my mom could afford. So my sister got her own room, and I had to, share a room with my mom. I shared a room with my mom for literally majority of my life. We moved into that house and we lived there for a while, and I lived right across the street from my best friend. So I felt like safe again. I felt homey-ish for a little bit. And then shortly after, we had a really crazy neighbor, and so they got into a fight, and then we had to move out. At that point, this house I loved. It was like kind of like a mobile home looking. It was like a long one. And it was 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, but on the side of it was a 1-bedroom apartment where my grandmother lived. So we all got to live in a house, but we were separate. That was really nice. Like I said, we've been low income my whole life, so a lot of months we didn't have money for food. We'd have money in the beginning of the month, and then towards the end of the month, my mom would have to go to churches or food drives or whatever, and it was like that literally my whole life. She would leave me at home sometimes, and my sister was gone because she lived with her boyfriend when she turned 16. She pretty much moved out. So my mom would leave me home, and there'd be no food in the house, so I'd have to go over to my grandmother's house and eat her food, and she really didn't have food either, but she would never let me starve. And my mom would leave me for days by myself. And I never went to school. I rarely went to school. And I really would only go to school just to eat, because that's where I could eat breakfast, lunch, and then I'd be okay for dinner, for not having anything for dinner. But that went on for a really long time. And then I met my ex-boyfriend, and my mom pretty much kicked me out of the house. And so I lived with him and his family took care of me. They fed me, they got me clothes, they took me to school. Mom took me out of school because I was missing so much of it, so I was homeschooled. And in the state of New Hampshire, they don't check up on you to see what you're doing, so you could just pull your kid out and not go to school. And that's what I did. I never went to school. I tried, but I was in a very toxic relationship. So I would rather be with my boyfriend at the time than go to school. And that's horrible, but just the way it was. Being in like middle school, and I would have my friend come over. She would ask to come over, and I would say, I'm sorry, I can't have you come over. We don't have any food. And she would bring over those little Knorr pasta sides. She'd bring over so many of them, and anything that they had to give us, they would give us. And she was the only person that really knew my struggles, because she wasn't in the best situation. Her house was. She knew what it was like, and I felt like she never judged me. All of my friends, I don't know that they would judge me, but I never told them. Kept it to myself. I was so embarrassed for people to even come over to my house because it wasn't nice. I mean, I had friends that had like really nice houses, and I'd go over their house as much as I could just so I could like have some food and wear their clothes and like have some sort of like normal in my life. Like, I used to get so jealous of my friends and like how they have like loving parents and, you know, cabinets full of food and fridges full of food. And like I said, I don't blame my mom. I know she did the best she could, but, you know, she could have done better. And that just makes me want to do the best I can for Wiley and be the best I can for Wiley, because I don't ever want Wiley to go through what I went through and have to worry about when his next meal would come, or having to wait until school to eat. You know, our fridge is literally pretty much always got food in it, and our cabinets always have food in it. And like I said in one of my videos, we spent so much on groceries, and that's because it is a fear of mine to not have groceries and not have food for Wiley, and I don't care about myself. As long as Wiley has food, that's all that really matters to me. But, you know, now that school is out due to the virus that's going around, like, my heart breaks for those kids. The kids that rely on school lunches, because I was that kid. I relied on school lunches to eat. I wish there was more I could do to help them. And like I said, my heart really breaks for them, because I know what that's like. And I know what it's like to live in a toxic household, and I can only imagine if something like this had happened when I was younger. I don't know what would have happened. But that's pretty much it, you guys. Thanks for watching my SAP story, and if you have something that's relatable, let me know. You don't have to put it in the comments below. You can message me or something, or I don't know. I'd love to hear your stories, and I'm sure everyone else would love to hear your stories, and just know there's nothing to be embarrassed about. I'm no longer embarrassed. I am proud that I have gone through all that stuff in my life, and I think it makes me way more grateful for the things I have versus the things that I don't. So that's pretty much it, you guys. Like I said, thanks for watching. I hope you will like this video and subscribe to our channel. I promise the next video will be happier. But yeah, guys, thanks. Bye.